So almost 5 years ago, in September 2008, there were a series of bomb blasts which rocked Delhi. And then less than a week later, there was a raid in Batla House area, in which an early morning raid, in which two young men, Atif Amin and Mohammad Sajid, were shot dead, and an inspector of the Special Cell of Delhi was also killed by the evening. He had sustained bullet injuries in the day, and so this was, what is known as the Batla House Encounter. And at that time, if you remember the headlines of all television programs, of all news channels and newspapers, the headlines were uniformly that Batla House Encounter, inspector shot dead, terrorist escape, terrorists killed, Indian Mujahideen plot cracked, and so on and so forth. Then very next day, in fact, we went to the house where the encounter had taken place. We met neighbors, we met people who lived in the vicinity, and one look at the flat and the building in which the encounter had taken place told us that there was something seriously wrong with what the police was saying. The fact that the police's main theory was that two terrorists had fled while firing at the police could not be sustained in light of what we saw there, at the site of the encounter. This was a narrow house. This is a 4-story narrow house, and anybody who's familiar with the area knows that one house is sort of, next to another, and there's only one way in which, anybody could have gone up or down, which was this one narrow staircase, and it was encased in an iron grill. So there was absolutely no way that somebody could have fled from that place. When the police story was also that there were people there were policemen standing in the lane downstairs. So, for us, that was the first, question mark before us. Obviously there was something very, very wrong with the police theory, but the question was also why the general media reporting were ignoring this question. So then we started to investigate a little bit more, and which culminated in a report that we brought out in 2009, which was Encounter at Batla House Unanswered Questions, where we raised a lot of questions, namely that initially the post-mortem reports of the deceased were not being released. It was after RTA applications were being filed over and over again, appeals were being made over and over again, that the NHRC finally released those reports. Neither AIMS nor the Delhi police released those reports, the post-mortem reports. And what the post-mortem reports showed us really confirmed our worst fears. And in fact, at the time of the burial itself of these two boys, there were photographs which had appeared in newspapers and elsewhere, which showed that there were injuries on the bodies of these two boys, especially on Atif Amin's back, which was totally, the skin was sloughed off. So that raised certain questions, and the post-mortem reports only seemed to confirm the questions. For example, the most glaring thing that the post-mortem report showed was that both the boys had not been fired at from the front, in the front. Atif Amin had, I think, about 10 injuries, 10 gunshot entry wounds, of which 8 were from the back, which meant that the bullets had entered from the back and exited from the front. And similarly for Sajid, all the bullet wounds were in the head here, and the trajectory clearly showed that it went from, it was a downwards trajectory. So clearly the police story that they went in, they were fired upon and they fired back does not hold, in the light of the post-mortem reports, which clearly belied the police story. So these were several questions which were raised. Now again, coming to, Shehzad's case, which is going to be pronounced today. Again, there's nothing absolutely to connect Shehzad's to the plot or to that place itself, except for the recovery of one passport which had expired by the time of 2008. That is the only thing. If the police says that he was living there with the other boys, the fact is that if anybody lives, there should be some items of belonging which should have been found or recovered from the spot. But the fact that not even one, shirt, pant or anything else of, item of daily use, not even a toothbrush that they could, connect Shehzad to, clearly points to the fact that he wasn't living there, that the passport was later planted. And the important point here is that none of the seizures that the recoveries that the police has claimed to have made from that place is signed by independent witnesses. There are only police witnesses who have signed to that. It's interesting that this flat is in an area which is thickly populated. I'm sure there are many, people of good reputation who live in that area. The police could have enlisted any of these to be as public witnesses. that is the procedure, and if people do not agree to becoming public witnesses, then their names are taken down. There is a certain set procedure to raids and recoveries. That was not followed. So the seizures themselves are very, very suspect. So there is absolutely, except apart from this passport itself, there is nothing that connects Shehzad to that flat. And also the fact, that the other two boys, Atif, especially Atif Amin, he when he had rented that flat, he had gone in for a police verification, and he had submitted his driving license and other documents which have proven to be genuine. Now why would terrorist who's planning a major serial blast in the capital city would give his documents voluntarily to a police station for verification? That really strains one's credulity. So many of these questions continue to be in the public domain and will continue to cast a shadow over this whole Batla House encounter. Now, actually, to say that the judgment today is a judgment of the Batla House encounter would be a slight, confusion, actually, because the NHRC has very clear guidelines about what to do when an encounter killing takes place. That is, an FIR has to be filed against the police party which has conducted the raid. Now, if you look at the FIR which has been filed in this case, in fact, if you look at any FIR in any encounter killing, this is the NHRC guideline is completely flouted, because no FIR is ever filed against the police party. The FIRs are always filed against people who've been killed, which is, a complete violation of the NHRC guideline. Now, the FIR was filed against, not against the police party, but against the deceased, the two dead boys. Then magisterial inquiry is a mandatory process or a requirement by NHRC guidelines. Magisterial inquiry was not allowed. In fact, there has been no inquiry into the encounter case. I mean, what we have is a sham in the name of the NHRC inquiry, which did not even bother to visit the spot, which is, I think, about 7 or 8 kilometers from their office. They sat in their offices and wrote that report, not bothering to venture out to the site of the incident, to the spot of the incident, to look at, to examine the site and to examine the story, whether it fitted or not. They did not bother to do that. In fact, they based the report entirely on the testimonies or the statements of 3 police officers, and these are the people who are being investigated in the first place. So they depend or rely actually on people who are the accused in the case, and come to the conclusion that this encounter was genuine. Also, what is of importance is that the NHRC at that time, when it was writing its report, was privy to the post-mortem reports, which were not in the public domain at that time. It was only the NHRC which had access to those post-mortem reports, and NHRC did not seem exercised at all by the fact that there were non-firearm wounds and injuries on the bodies of these 2 dead boys. That the back, the skin was sloughed off, that on the kneecap there was an injury which clearly the post-mortem report says that caused by blunt object or flat surface. Similarly, on Sajid's body there were injuries which were not firearm injuries, but were caused by flat objects or surfaces. The NHRC did not deign to ask why these injuries were caused, how the deaths of these 2 boys were caused. The fact that all the bullet injuries were in the back did not concern the NHRC. So you do not have a magisterial inquiry, you have a completely sham and shallow NHRC report which parroted the police version. You do not have any judicial inquiry. There is no actually free and fair independent probe into the incident. Now, even this trial which has gone on is about the murder or the killing of Inspector Sharma. The deaths of these 2 boys, Atif Amin and Sajid, has gone into a kind of a legal black hole. There is no investigation into how they died. There is, even in the trial, in fact, the defense counsel raised this question, that the death of the accused must be explained. The death of both Atif and Sajid must be explained, but nobody has bothered to explain it. The question is, regardless of what way the judgment will go today, the fact is that we will not know the truth about that day unless we know how these 2 boys also died. That is also crucial to understanding, the whole incident. So, but today's judgment, of course, is about, whether Shehzad was present at the site or not. And I think the defense counsel has amply destroyed the prosecution case, the flimsiness of the prosecution case during the course of the trial. He's clearly showed up how There are discrepancies in the police version itself about the preparation for the raid, because there are some special cell officers who testified saying that we knew about the raid the night before, and in fact we were asked to come early in the morning. There were others who said, oh, we didn't know about it, we came to know in the morning. So there are all these discrepancies which have been highlighted in the course of the cross-examination by the defense counsel. Also the fact that there is nothing at all to connect Shehzad to the spot. And one important thing is that, it's been tom-tommed a lot in the media as well, that the police has circumstantial evidence to nail Shehzad, which is called records, that he was in touch with Atif Amin. Right? Now the fact is that the police actually took voice samples of Shehzad, but somehow along the course of the trial, they seem to have disappeared. They were not placed as evidence. Why did the police hide the results of the voice sampling, the tests of the voice sampling from the court? Why was it not placed? So clearly the prosecution case is on a very weak ground, and we hope today to see an acquittal. See, even the person, I think his name is Mr. Malik, but I can't confirm the name right now, who called up the local police station, the Jamia Nagar police station, to say that, he lives practically next to the house, and he called up the police station to say that, there's firing going on. He's the complainant in the case, and even he was not made a witness. So there's a deliberate design to keep out the locals who could have provided an alternative view of the whole incident out of the trial. Now where do they go? They can only depose in front of a commission. They can depose they were not even called to the NHRC to depose. They can't stand on the streets and say that, we saw this or we saw that. It has to have been a proper forum, and where do they have not been made witnesses. They've not been asked to depose in any magisterial inquiry. They've not been there because there is no magisterial inquiry. The NHRC did not bother to summon any of them. In fact, there were parents and families of and people in Azamgarh who had sent letters to the NHRC saying that we have heard that you're conducting this probe and we would like to depose in front of you. They did not even acknowledge those letters. This prosecution story is that this Shehzad and another person, Junaid, they ran down the stairs. They were firing at everybody and they ran down the stairs, right? Which means that their bullets must have been recovered. But somehow, whatever bullets have been recovered, but the weapon was not recovered, according to the prosecution's own story. The weapon was not recovered because they ran off with the weapon, and according to the prosecution's story, the weapon was thrown in some canal somewhere from which it could never be recovered. And there were two police parties who had reached by then. There were policemen at the gate, there were policemen in the lane, there were policemen in the back lane as well, right? And they say that he fired, so his bullets are not recovered. The only bullets that are recovered from the site or from the bulletproof jacket of a police officer are those which match with the weapons which have been recovered, right? So this unrecovered weapon, so-called, which was used by Shehzad, there's no bullet there which matches with any unrecovered weapon. So weapon has not been recovered. There are no bullets which link Shehzad to the firing, right? There's nothing absolutely at all, no item of belonging which links him to that site, and still he's the main accused. This is really incredible.